Welcome, friend. I'm James, your host, and today we're diving into another captivating episode. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and get ready for a powerful story that's sure to resonate. If something hits home, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive in.
I think my wife cheated on me. Now we're roommates in an open marriage. So here I am, sitting in my cluttered home office in the heart of Los Angeles, feeling utterly shattered and betrayed. I'm 40M and my wife, 43F, and I have been together for 13 years and married for 10. From the outside, we had the picture-perfect family. 2 kids, a cozy home, and shared dreams. But it all unraveled last night, and I found myself spiraling into a dark abyss that I never anticipated. The facade of our perfect life crumbled, revealing the chaos beneath. It all started when my wife told me she was heading out to buy some stuff for the house. Immediately, a knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't like her. She left with a guy I didn't know, and I could feel the unease creeping in like a shadow at dusk. As the hours dragged on, the house grew eerily quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, each tick amplifying the anxiety gnawing at my insides. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the house settling, echoing the tension building inside me. I put the kids to bed, all the while battling my rising anxiety. I paced the living room, feeling the walls close in on me, trying to discern if there had been signs I had overlooked, if I had missed some cue that might have warned me of the impending storm. Memories of laughter and joy now felt distant and fragile, replaced by a gnawing fear that something was terribly wrong. When she finally returned, hours later than expected, I noticed something strange. She had spent the day getting ready, putting on makeup, wearing that stunning dress I had always loved. Yet when she walked through the door, I could sense something was off. I felt like a detective in a noir film, piecing together clues scattered across our home. The way she held her head high, her eyes averted, screamed of secrets unspoken. The atmosphere was thick with tension as she avoided my gaze, and I couldn't help but notice the seductive underwear she had donned, clearly meant for someone else. My heart raced as I replayed the night in my mind, desperately searching for any hint of what had transpired. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of unaddressed issues and unresolved feelings. The sight of her looking so beautiful, yet so distant, sent a wave of betrayal crashing over me. It felt like a dagger to my heart. My suspicions turned into dread as I checked around the house, searching for any signs of betrayal, desperately hoping to find evidence that would ease my panic. After a few days of turmoil, I finally mustered the courage to confront her. We sat down in the dimly lit kitchen, a place that had once been filled with laughter and shared meals, but now felt like an emotional battlefield. As I spoke, my voice trembled with the weight of my emotions, and I struggled to keep my composure. The walls seemed to close in around us, amplifying the sense of dread that enveloped the room. I felt like I was treading on eggshells, afraid that one wrong word would shatter the fragile peace we were clinging to. The air was thick with unspoken fears and unexpressed hurt, and I could see the shadows of doubt flickering across her face as I pressed her for answers. When she finally admitted that she had been talking to this guy for a while, even planning to have a sexual encounter with him, it felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled away. My heart raced as she casually mentioned her reasons, how he had wanted more, but she didn't. I was overwhelmed by a rush of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, each pulling me in different directions. Her nonchalance pierced through me like a knife, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. I felt my resolve weaken as I grappled with the reality of her betrayal, the once solid foundation of our marriage now reduced to fragile shards. I asked her about the seductive underwear, the makeup, the date night dress. Each question felt like a bullet aimed at her heart, but I needed answers. I wanted to understand what had driven her to this point, how she could justify the hurt she was inflicting on our family. Her response was evasive, cloaked in a veil of rationalization that only fueled my frustration. She looked at me, eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance, and that infuriated me further. In that moment, I realized I was not just fighting for our marriage, I was fighting for my own sense of self-worth. The woman I loved had become a stranger, and the weight of that realization crushed me. How could she act as if it were all so trivial? My heart was breaking, and I felt like I was battling not just her infidelity, but a war against the very person I had built my life with. I could feel the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I fought them back. I refused to show weakness, not now. In the days that followed, I made the difficult decision to keep the information about her ongoing communication with the man a secret for now. I didn't want to put her on high alert, fearing that she would cut ties even more firmly. I couldn't shake the image of that guy, older and fit, looking at my kids and my life like it was some prize to be won. As the days turned into a blur of conflicting emotions, I felt the weight of each moment pressing down on me. The silence between us grew louder, and every glance exchanged felt like a battle of wills. I could sense that she was still wrestling with her own demons, but I was exhausted by the uncertainty. With each passing day, the emotional tension grew, and I felt my grip on reality slipping as I struggled to reconcile the woman I loved with the stranger she had become. I found solace in friends who listened and offered support, yet deep down, I knew I had to confront this head-on, no matter how much it hurt. I began to confide in a close friend, pouring out my heart in long conversations over coffee. Their support became a lifeline, grounding me when the world felt like it was spinning out of control. After a couple of days spent in their garden, digging up weeds and planting new seeds, I returned home with a newfound sense of peace. The fresh air and hard work had done wonders for my mental state, and I felt invigorated. My wife greeted me with unexpected warmth, and for a fleeting moment, I almost believed in the possibility of a fresh start. She showered me with affection, as if trying to make up for the emotional distance that had been driving us apart. But as I stepped into the house, the memories of the previous weeks flooded back. I realized that despite her change in demeanor, the past still loomed heavily in my mind. I began to scrutinize every word she spoke, every gesture, searching for signs of sincerity. The way she had looked at me with anger, the secrets she had kept, it all felt like a veil that could drop at any moment. My heart battled against my mind, yearning to believe her, yet wary of falling into the same traps that had ensnared me before. It was a delicate dance between hope and skepticism, and I knew I had to tread carefully. I found myself replaying moments in my head, trying to pinpoint when our connection had begun to fray. As I continued to rediscover parts of myself, I realized I was regaining my sense of agency. I started hitting the gym regularly, finding comfort in the physical exertion that allowed me to channel my pain into something productive. Each weight I lifted felt like a small victory over the heartache that had once consumed me. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the reality of my marriage and focus solely on myself. I found solace in the rhythm of my workouts, a reprieve from the emotional turmoil that swirled around me. With every drop of sweat, I shed not just pounds, but also the emotional baggage that had weighed me down for so long. I began to notice the changes in my body, the way my muscles toned and my energy levels surged. I felt more confident, more alive, and it was exhilarating. The more I focused on self-improvement, the more attention I received from others. Women seemed to notice the transformation, and I found myself enjoying the flirtations that came my way. It felt good to be desired again, to be reminded that I was still attractive, even in the midst of my crumbling marriage. But with that newfound attention came a complex mix of guilt and exhilaration, as I struggled to reconcile my emotional turmoil with the thrill of reconnecting with my own identity. Our communication began to improve slowly, and I took charge of my life in ways I hadn't expected. My wife started to express her affection more openly, but I was hesitant to fully embrace it. I had been burned too deeply and too recently to let my guard down completely. Each kind word felt like a double-edged sword, cutting through my defenses, but also reminding me of the wounds that still needed healing. It was a fragile state we were in, both of us aware that we were treading on thin ice. I wanted to believe her when she said she loved me, that she wanted to repair the damage, but every word was tempered by doubt. I had seen the darkness that lay beneath her surface, the anger that had driven her to betrayal, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it could return at any moment. As I focused on my own well-being, I began to wonder if I was merely postponing the inevitable or if there was a path forward for us. The questions loomed large in my mind, haunting me day and night. Was I just a temporary refuge for her while she sorted through her feelings? Would she inevitably return to the other man? Or worse, would she seek out new relationships as a way to cope with her dissatisfaction? Each passing day felt like a precarious balancing act, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep my footing. In the meantime, I became more involved in my children's lives, planning family outings and activities that brought us closer together. I took them to the park, where we would play for hours, their laughter echoing around me like a soothing balm for my heart. Each moment spent with them felt like a balm for my soul, soothing the wounds left by my wife's betrayal. I immersed myself in their joy, creating memories that stood in stark contrast to the chaos at home. We built sandcastles, flew kites, and had impromptu picnics, all of which helped me to forget, if only for a moment, the turmoil brewing within our household. I wanted to protect their innocence and shield them from the turmoil that had engulfed our family. It felt like a balancing act, trying to be a good father while grappling with the heartbreak of a fractured marriage. I made an effort to be present, to engage fully in their lives, and to show them the love they deserved. My kids were my anchor, and their laughter became the soundtrack to my healing journey. I found joy in their smiles, strength in their hugs, and a renewed sense of purpose in being the father they deserved. I also started involving them in simple chores around the house, teaching them the importance of responsibility and teamwork, which allowed us to bond further. As I navigated these turbulent waters, I began to understand that healing takes time. I learned to be patient with myself and with my wife, recognizing that both of us were still processing the aftermath of her betrayal. Each day was a step forward, but also a reminder of the scars we carried. I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. With each passing day, I became more determined to reclaim my life and my happiness, regardless of what the future held for our marriage. The idea of an open relationship began to weigh heavily on my mind, and I wrestled with whether that could ever be a viable option for us. I found myself questioning the very foundation of our partnership and wondering if we could ever return to the love we once shared. As I moved through the days, I would often reflect on what had drawn us together in the first place, trying to rekindle those feelings, but finding it increasingly difficult to ignore the shadows of doubt. In a moment of vulnerability, I decided to reach out to a therapist, someone who could guide me through the emotional chaos swirling within me. The sessions were a revelation, providing me with tools to navigate my feelings and understand the dynamics of my relationship. I learned the importance of setting boundaries, of not allowing my wife's actions to dictate my self-worth. Each session helped me unpack the complex layers of love, betrayal, and forgiveness, challenging me to confront my feelings head-on, rather than bury them beneath layers of resentment and confusion. As I became more adept at articulating my emotions, I found myself gaining clarity in ways I hadn't expected. I began to see the value in addressing my own needs, rather than solely focusing on my wife's emotional turmoil. Despite the progress, the specter of my wife's infidelity lingered in the background, a constant reminder of the fragility of our union. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, she approached me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Was it guilt, longing, or something else entirely? She reached for my hand, and I felt a jolt of electricity pass between us. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I want to make it right." The sincerity in her tone caught me off guard, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Could this be the turning point we desperately needed? But as I looked into her eyes, I was reminded of the betrayal that had cut so deep. I struggled to respond, torn between my desire for connection and the fear of being hurt again. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed our conversation in my mind. I wanted to believe her, to hope for a second chance, but the scars of her betrayal were still fresh. How could I allow myself to be vulnerable again when she had shattered my trust so completely? The weight of the decision loomed large over me. I could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting as I tried to make sense of my emotions. I couldn't shake the thought that perhaps the open relationship she had proposed was not a path toward healing, but rather a detour that would only lead to further heartache. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself at a crossroads. My wife continued to express her desire to rebuild our relationship, and while I appreciated her efforts, I could sense that the road to redemption would be long and fraught with challenges. We began spending more time together, attempting to reconnect through shared activities, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't ignore. I started to question whether we were simply going through the motions, pretending that everything was fine when, in reality, we were both grappling with our pain. Then came the day when my wife suggested we revisit the idea of an open marriage. I could feel the blood drain from my face as she spoke, her words slicing through the fragile peace we had managed to cultivate. "I think it could help us both find what we need," she said, her eyes wide with enthusiasm. My heart raced with a mixture of anger and confusion. Did she really think that introducing new partners into the mix would solve our problems? I felt a surge of emotions welling up inside me: betrayal, frustration, and sadness. How could she not see the damage her previous choices had inflicted on us? I couldn't understand how she thought this was the solution to our issues. "No," I said firmly, my voice steady but laced with a quiet fury. "That's not what I want. I need to feel secure, and opening our marriage would only deepen my wounds." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of my thoughts pressed down on me. My mind raced, contemplating the precarious situation we were in. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, with no clear path ahead. Every time I thought about the possibility of her being with someone else, a wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to believe that we could navigate this together, but every conversation seemed to dig us deeper into a hole we might never escape. My heart was torn between my desire to forgive and rebuild, and the overwhelming urge to protect myself from further hurt. Finally, I made the decision to confront the reality of our situation. I scheduled a sit-down with my wife, determined to lay everything on the table. We needed to communicate openly about our fears, desires, and the painful truths that lingered in the air between us. As we sat across from each other, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, mirroring my own. "I don't know where we go from here," I admitted, my voice steady but trembling with vulnerability. "But we need to be honest about what we both want." Our conversation unfolded like a delicate dance, each word chosen with care. We spoke about the cracks in our foundation, the trust that had been shattered, and the steps we needed to take to begin healing. I found myself sharing my deepest fears: the fear of losing her, the fear of being left behind, and the fear of repeating the mistakes of the past. To my surprise, she opened up about her insecurities, the feelings of inadequacy that had driven her to seek validation outside our marriage. We explored the roots of her betrayal, delving into the emotional turmoil that had led her down that dark path. By the end of our conversation, I felt a shift in the air between us. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and I could finally breathe a little easier. We were still far from the finish line, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. As I looked into her eyes, I could see a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with, buried beneath the layers of pain and regret. I realized that we had a long road ahead, but I was willing to walk it if it meant rediscovering the love we once shared. With each passing day, I committed to rebuilding my life, one step at a time. I began to embrace self-care practices, focusing on my physical and emotional health. I attended therapy sessions regularly, delving deeper into my feelings and processing the emotional scars left by my wife's betrayal. I also started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages as a way to understand and process my emotions. I found solace in writing, a release that allowed me to articulate my pain and hope for the future. As the seasons changed in Los Angeles, I embraced the new beginnings that each day brought. My children thrived in an environment filled with laughter and love, and I vowed to be the father they deserved. I prioritized family dinners, movie nights, and outdoor adventures, cherishing the moments we spent together. I also began to explore new hobbies, taking up photography as a creative outlet. Capturing the beauty around me helped me appreciate the world anew. A reminder that life continues even amidst heartache. My wife continued to show her commitment to our marriage, attending therapy sessions and actively working on herself. We shared meals, went for walks, and reconnected through shared interests.